Hello, everyone. I'd like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. My name is Brian Laufer, and I'm the Vice President here at QuoteWerks. This webinar is part of a webinar series that we are using to spotlight integrations and ways to extend QuoteWerks to make you more efficient and profitable. Now, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Paul Hodgetts. Paul is the Managing Director at Quintadena, and Quintadena has been the #1 QuoteWerks sales partner in the world for over 14 years. As you know, Paul will be talking about Quintadena's integration that bridges the gap between Xero accounting and QuoteWerks. After Paul's presentation, we'll have time to answer any questions that you might have. With that, I'll allow you to share your screen, Paul, and please take it away. So, make you the presenter, and there you go.
Share my screen. Okay, is that?
Yep, we can see your screen, Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join the session today. I'm guessing, having signed up for a webinar about the integration between QuoteWerks and Xero, you're pretty familiar with both products, what they do, so I'll just jump straight into explaining how we make them talk to each other. I thought I'd start with doing a very quick end-to-end skim through the process like your users would in everyday operation of it, and then I'll go back and step through it and show you the configuration and talk a little bit about some of the options that we have. So if we go, we'll start using QuoteWerks' nice template feature. We've got I'm going to jump in at the point at which the customer has just placed the order. So they've gone into Quote Valley. That's a tip for Brian. I'm pushing Quote Valley for you. They've pressed the button. They've signed up on Quote Valley. They've put their own purchase order number in here. All their contact details are in, and so we're good to go. At this point, the integration can trigger a send. We've got options of creating purchase orders in Xero and a sales invoice in Xero. So on this quote, you can see I've got 3 different vendors, eBuyer, West Coast Tech Data. So I'm going to be creating 3 purchase orders and fictional company A1 Design Services. As I said, there are some options around how you do this. At the moment, I'm just going to go ahead and create everything, which I do like that, and then cursor spins. I'll explain that again in a moment. And it's first thing it's doing is creating the purchase orders. It says it's created purchase orders 104, 105, 106, and then it'll move on to create the invoice. Successfully created invoice 74 for A1 Design Services. This screen gives you the opportunity to repeat it if something went wrong, maybe you're missing some information or something. But if you see that successfully created, that's definitely gone in. That response message, Xero sends us that message with those words. Okay, so I'll just close that. We've written that invoice number and those purchase order numbers into QuoteWerks, and because of where they are in QuoteWerks, they're nice and searchable. So if you have ever got a Xero invoice that you want to check, you can come on the header invoice, it'll be under X purchase order, and you can find it in QuoteWerks that way. Let's jump into Xero itself and have a look at what we've created. So let's look at the invoice first. So we create the invoice as a draft invoice. So you would still go in and check that, and you can send it out of Xero. There's the customer's purchase order number that they typed in on Quote Valley. No retyping at any point in that. So if we just look at the invoice and its description, quantity, the unit prices, it's put some tax codes in. I'll talk a bit more about those in a minute. It handles multi-currency essentially silently and intuitively. If your currency here is not your base currency. If you've got a different currency selected there, that is the currency that invoice will be created in using your QuoteWerks exchange rates. On the vendor side, I've set one of these vendors up as we're buying from them in Australian dollars, and when we look at that in a moment, we'll see that it's created the purchase order. So we'll go to the purchase orders again. Purchase orders are all created at draft, eBuyer, Tech Data, West Coast. So it's done the standard thing of looking at which unique vendors we've got on there and creating one purchase order for each. And it's also, you'll notice here, created that in AUD rather than, obviously my default being in the UK would be GBP. So the key thing here is it's quick. It's no retyping needed. You just send what you want. Okay. So I'd like to step back now and go through it again a little bit more step by step and look at some of the options that feature in there. So the first thing is how we authenticate with Xero. I've got what Xero calls tenancies, two Xero companies, Quintadena UK and Quintadena International, and I've got Quintadena UK connected to Xero. I can associate international as well. So if there's lots of applications that you might have seen that will have used a similar allow this process. So now if I minimize that, you can see I've got both Xero accounts. Relatively few businesses do have both, but we support that out of the box anyway. I've got some configurability about how I send the information from QuoteWerks to Xero. Unfortunately, this screen doesn't quite fit. I reduced my screen resolution for the demo, and so we're missing the save buttons on this version. But so these, as I said at the beginning, we can create purchase orders, we can create invoices, you can create either or both. I think everybody that uses this is creating invoices, and some people are creating purchase orders as well. So on the configuration, you say, do I want to create purchase orders or invoices or both? And the config options are pretty much the same. There are some variants that I want to call it a purchase order. I could call it anything I like. Where in QuoteWerks do I want to create them from? So in the demo, I've got both of these set to offer purchase orders and invoices from the QuoteWerks order stage. If you like to convert your QuoteWerks orders to invoices first and then send them, you'd set it up like this, and then that screen at the beginning where it said I'd got all the purchase order, or the big green screen, would only show purchase orders if you launched it from an order screen, and would only show invoices from there. Couple of housekeeping things. This is where this is saying which QuoteWerks field I want to write the Xero PO numbers to. This is how it caters for multiple Xero tenants. So because I've got two tenancies set up now, I can say I always want to send it to UK, I always want to send it to international. Or I could say, look in the QuoteWerks document, look in that field, and that field will have the tenancy that I want to send this to. Or I could say, ask me every transfer, and I'll leave that set to those. The next one down, what document number do I want to appear in Xero? Now, if we go back here, we saw the familiar PO-111-106. On the invoice side, invoices in Xero begin INV. That is what we recommend you use, so that's why that box is ticked. Use the Xero generated number. But if you want to, you can untick that. Probably most likely to do that on the PO side, where you might want the QuoteWerks document number or any other QuoteWerks header field that you've populated to generate. But as I say, the expectation would be you'd use Xero's next numbering. That way, the order of invoices, numbers and POs in Xero is sequential there, rather than depending on what order you happen to. We've got configurability about how the line item is described in Xero. So if we just open the invoice, that's saying that's using the QuoteWerks description, but I can build a QuoteWerks macro here using QuoteWerks macro field to put more than one field into that description. There aren't many fields on the header level in Xero, so basically any other information that you want has got to end up in the description field. Branding theme is the kind of the layout template that you want to use in Xero. That doesn't really exist in purchase orders, but on the invoice side, if you've got multiple branding themes defined in Xero, they'll be listed here. And again, you can either say use the branding theme labeled in this QuoteWerks header field, or just leave that blank and say always use this Xero one. And the rest of them kind of work in the same sort of way. So tracking is Xero categorization. So we've got, you can use, so that's these two fields here. So one track, you get two fields that you can write to. One that I've called service, one that I've called support, hardware, PS, etc., gold, silver, bronze. And here you can say which QuoteWerks fields, these will be item level fields, do I want to use to identify that, and what's the default. And all of these default values are being picked up live from Xero by the configuration. We've got quite a nice feature that when you're configuring it, is that if I double click here, it will tell me how this field is currently being used in QuoteWerks. So if you're looking to configure this and you're not sure whether we've used that field before or whether it's constant use, you just select a field and say, if you double click in that, so this field is currently being used 30 times for that and no other times for anything else. So that field is relatively. So as you're building the configuration, we're trying to make it easy for you to identify which fields used. GL code, tax code, those are all that field, that column, and that's the GL code there, that's the tax code. And again, the defaults, if you don't use, the beauty of using, particularly on the GL code, the tax code, of using QuoteWerks item custom fields, is that means you can put those Xero codes in your product database, and then your sales rep selects it, orders it, and it'll go into the right place in Xero. Obviously, if it's a product you pull down from Etilize or something like that, you'd want a default, or you might want to put it, you might want to specify it prior to the transfer. So purchase currency, you can see we had that purchase and due date. So so that's when you do a purchase order, it's like, when do I want to raise that purchase order? What's the due date? That's going to be in that QuoteWerks field. Shipping, account and tax code. Xero doesn't have an equivalent of the QuoteWerks shipping down here. So if you're using that, then what we'll do is create another line item on the Xero invoice using, again, that code and that tax code. Okay, so I'll just close that out. Right, so that gives you a flavor, I hope, for the kind of things that you can configure and how you can make it personal to your business needs. I'd like to go through the process again a little bit more slowly this time, and pay attention to some of the things we've got here. I'm going to clear out this contact and put another one in, just pick them kind of at random. but I'm going to, right, my clock on this says 19:15 because that's UK time. So I'm just going to make this business, you'll see why I do this in a minute. So this is going to be John Smith Studios 1915 is the business name. So that business doesn't currently exist in Xero. We've got the ability to match customers in quotes, customers in Xero. It'll try using the account ID. At this point, Brian is frowning at me for using a pre-564 build of QuoteWerks without the we support both. So it'll attempt to match on that ID. It'll attempt to match on the name. If it finds a close match, it'll give you a choice of the matches. Otherwise, it'll in this case, what it's going to do is going to create that as a new account. On the line items, the philosophy we've got here is if it's blank, we use the default. So just sort of, if we can imagine this, these three products have come in from a product database somewhere, and they've got a specific tax code, a specific GL account code, and specified that they're in. Everything else, I've left it blank, so those are going to pick up the defaults. I am, however, going to set a PO due date on, I'm going to set a couple of PO due dates, put different ones on that. So, and let's change the purchase order as well. So PO, something different. I'll save that. And then we're ready to go. So I've added the send to Xero to the file menu. You can put it on any menu you like. Again, I'm going to leave both of these boxes ticked. If I untick that one, then it'll only give me the option to send invoices in on this transfer. And then this screen allows you to split the job into part invoices or part purchase orders. So let's say that at the moment, I just want to take 10% of the value of the invoice as a deposit. And at this time, on my purchase order, I only want to PO the top. So the top 4 lines, and I want to purchase order. There's 25 on the order. I haven't ordered any yet on this one, so the 25 outstanding is what that message is about. Let's say I want to PO 18 of those. Oops. And it won't let me type in more than I've ordered. So I've typed that in there, and it's going to assume that I want the whole lot. And I can do a percentage on here as well. So for some reason, we don't need to worry about why, I want to create an invoice for 10% of the whole order, and I want to purchase just these lines or just these parts of these lines. So this screen actually is older than the Xero integration. We wrote that first, and then we when we came to write the Xero integration, we chained that on at the end. And you can see in the background, this isn't this part of it isn't something that users would normally see. We'd probably hide these columns, but this is how it's doing cutting. Now, something perhaps a bit surprising. We've only got 3 vendors on the quote, but we've created 5 purchase orders, 3 for West Coast. The reason for that is that it looks at unique vendors by due date. So that we've got a purchase order that will have a blank due date. We've got one that will have 17th and one that will have 26th of November. Or if you are watching this in the States, that's the 11th day of the 17th month of the year and the 11th day of the 26th. The 26th month is roughly where we are in the year 2020 now, waiting for COVID to finish. So it's created the purchase orders, and now you can see it's defaulted in the default GL codes for all the line items that I did not populate the hard way in the quote. We don't do that in the due date. If it's blank, it'll be blank in Xero. There's sound reasons why we do that. So if we now go to let's look at contacts. So hopefully we've got a John Smith Studios 1915. So it identified that we hadn't got John Smith, it created it. It takes all the, as you'd probably expect it would, it takes all the information off that screen to do that. So let's go and look at an invoice. And there's the invoice. It calculates its 10% just by dividing the quantity by 10. That's not very realistic in terms of products, but the number is correct, which is kind of what we're aiming for there. And then if we go and look at the POs, draft POs, so you can see here are the 107 through 111. And we've got those delivery dates coming in here on the West Coast one. Okay, and then just to finish the cycle with the part ordering, when I next come to send to Xero, it knows how much. It's a bit like Santa Claus. Actually, sorry, I didn't close it. It knows when you're been sleeping and knows when you're awake. So it knows what you've sent and it knows what is outstanding. So it'll never let you. Okay, so 8 ordered, 0.8 to go, 0.8 gone, leaves 7.2. And the default on this screen, you can change it. The default is to send everything that is outstanding. So if I just hit, well, I could do like a further 40%. Those are 40% of the original amount. It's not 40% of what's left. So if you're doing a sort of 10% with order, 60% upon delivery, and then some balance, then those numbers are what you'd select from here. I've got some shortcuts: send nothing, send all of it on that level. So I'll just send everything that is outstanding. And I mentioned on my configuration screen, it's going to ask every time which Xero tenancy. So Quintadena UK, send it to there. 2 more purchase orders. So obviously I'd already sent all of the West Coast lines, so only 2 POs left to do. And created an invoice. Obviously, this customer existed at the point, so it won't have recreated it. And so purchases, let's go to invoice. And by now you should sort of, it's kind of what you'd expect. And I'm just going 63, 64. Then, because some of these have got Xero tax on it, you can't quite look at the numbers and say, oh, that's 10% of that, because some of them, they have different, some of them have non-Xero tax and some of them Xero tax. So that's the, and then from here, oh, you can, there's the customer purchase order to come in. From there, you can do what you normally do in Xero, which is post the invoice and then PDF it out from here. There is an option, which I haven't set on this one, that actually generates the PDF out of QuoteWerks. There's a setting that you can say that would nominate a layout file here, and then after it's sent it to Xero, it's got the Xero invoice number. It can generate the PDF using a QuoteWerks layout template, and it could actually email it as well if you want to keep all of your documents with the same sort of house style, template style you want to use. They've seen it as a QuoteWerks quote. It's easier to do that out of QuoteWerks than to create a Xero layout that exactly matches your QuoteWerks layout. So you've got both options. Awesome. And the same on both. I think that's probably all I have to say.
Very good. Yeah, I think the power with this integration obviously is the integration itself, but the fact that you're able to split your invoices up like that, I think that's super cool. That's something that we don't do with any of our other integrations, so that's definitely very powerful. So at this point, we're going to open up the floor for questions if anybody has any. If you have a question, make sure to ask it in the chat. And while people are thinking about a question, there are some good questions for you here. if they're new to the integration, what would it cost them to move forward with the integration?
So we're running at $20 per user per month. Most businesses only would need one. You can see it's quick to do. So we're pricing it as similar to the QuoteWerks QuickBooks native integration. That keeps it nice and simple. It will it will be available through the Xero App Store by the end of November. We've gone through the Xero accreditation process. We've passed all the technical accreditation for that, I'm delighted to say. We're just waiting for the kind of sign up routine and some stuff around that. You can buy it now. We've had customers live for over 10 years one way or another on this, but it will be available through. So there's in Xero, from within Xero, you can go to the App Store and there'll be sign up links from there. But yeah, $20 per user per month, and the expectation would be you'd probably only need one license.
Okay. All right, so we do have some questions that came in now. Emma has a question. If you are already using the phasing feature within QuoteWerks, will this still work with Xero integration?
You can use it. We define another transfer type on the end. Emma will know exactly what I'm talking about here. Just for context, I said earlier that the part invoicing came first, and the Xero as an output to that. We've got a number of different things that we could chain onto the part invoicing, and Emma's phasing is one of them. But yeah, you can use this. We could say that was another output from one of your existing phases, or we could set it up independently.
Okay. And then a little longer question. Ian here, this may be a question for either Brian or Paul. Paul, we spoke earlier today, while you're popular. Can you look up a contact in your CRM to add to the requested order by and look up a contact record in Xero for the bill invoice to?
The way it works at the moment is we are pushing contacts into Xero. I've got this one set up to use the QuoteWerks native contact manager, but what I say will apply to whichever contact manager you use it for. So I recommend in practice, if you've been using Xero for a while, would be to take a one-off cut of your Xero contacts as they stand at the point which you start using this, and then import those into the contact manager. You might need to do some alignment, if you've got limited with a full stop after a bit of data cleansing as a one-off operation. From then on, you've got the contacts that you've got in your contact manager there'll be nobody in Xero that isn't in the contact manager, but there will be people in the contact manager that aren't in Xero. So at that point, whenever you do a transfer to Xero, it will either say, I'm already there, so I don't need to do anything, or I'll create a new one, or I kind of think that this might be who you're matching, but I'm not entirely sure, in which case it'll give you a list of possible matches, and you can select that one, or there's a button to say create a new customer.
Okay, and then a question here from Malcolm. What is the minimum version of QuoteWerks this works with?
I'm going to say 4.6.
Okay, very good.
Though I wouldn't say I tested it against that for a while. We compile all of our applications against quite a lot of back numbers of QuoteWerks, certainly back to 5.0, and I think we still do build against 4.6. It's not tested for a while, but there's nothing in here that would require any particularly new features of QuoteWerks, and that build process understands, that in QuoteWerks, for example, in a recent build, we've now got contact ID and account ID down here. That's kind of backwardly compatible So we could go back, but any
Yeah.
plausible version of QuoteWerks, I'm pretty sure we'd support.
Yeah, and those fields that you're talking about, those were always there just in the background. So
Yeah.
you just couldn't see them. All right, great. Well, it looks like that's all the questions people have. If they do have more questions for you or about the integration, who should they contact and where should they go?
If you drop a line at sales@quintadena.com, or I think our details are on the webinar material.
They should be. I'll make sure that they'll be in the bottom of the video that we've recorded. That way, everybody has that as well. So that way, they'll have the web address as well as your email address.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, it looks like that's all there is. Just a little bit of housekeeping on our side. From the QuoteWerks side, you will be receiving some new emails from us in addition to this webinar recording. QuoteWerks version 5.7 will be coming out in the next month or so. And I'm not going to tease what's in there except for vendor RFQ, which is a new product that we're releasing. And you'll probably be getting a new email probably weekly about that as well. So if you have any questions about QuoteWerks or Quintadena's integration to Xero, please feel free to send us an email or visit our website. We will also have information about how to watch this video on our website as well. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us.